Stock markets? Wants to go for a walk outside the house with a friend? Introducing iCapital, where you can get investment advice on the go. It is accessible via app and website. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. iCapital is reliable because they thoroughly research listed companies, economies, and stock markets. iCapital provides a clear perspective of how markets interact and how it influences your investment. When investors and traders are debating whether to buy or sell their stocks, fret not, as iCapital will recommend Malaysian and global stocks. iCapital is available on Apple App Store, Google Play Store, and Huawei App Gallery. Download it now.
Okay, hi, good morning everyone. Apologies for, I'm not sure, they call it technical issues. Actually, it's not technical issue, actually it's human issues, Every time we want to blame it on the equipment, actually you got to blame it on the human beings, because the human beings are the one who operate the machine. So the poor machine gets the blame, but the human beings doesn't get the blame. So I will blame our human beings, our staff. Those of you who are on Facebook, you can't get, for some reason, we still cannot figure out why we cannot get connected to Facebook, and we are only able to stream through YouTube, right? And like I said, I apologize for the delay. I'm not sure how things can go right for other live sessions, and then something went wrong for this live session. So for those of you who are still with us on YouTube, let me just ask a quick question. And if you can, please respond. How many of you eat sushi, sashimi, or the Wagyu beef, or some form of Japanese food, like say once a week? How many of you do that? How many of you eat this kind of food regularly? If you can, please tell us your experience, because it's important. This week's topic, our recorded session on the ringgit has garnered more views than whatever we could ever imagine. We expected maybe 2,000 views. I think as of yesterday, I think we're about 80,000 views. So obviously the ringgit is of major concern to the ordinary Malaysian. And this today's session, which is about the Fukushima nuclear plant, in a way is no less important than the ringgit. In a way, it can be more important than the weakening ringgit, because it's a complicated subject. It's highly technical, but the impact on the ordinary people, on the ordinary person, is simple. It can affect your health. It can affect your family, your friends, the health of your colleagues, and so on. So, and the thing is, the the impact will only be felt like many years in the future. So you cannot, it's not like the ringgit declining, immediately the ringgit falls, therefore the cost of traveling goes up. The linkage is immediate. In this case, when the Japanese government discharges the radioactive Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean, the effect will be felt maybe 5 years later, 10 years later. And for the person who is affected, to be able to link it and trace it back, to be able to establish the cause effect relationship, is complex. And I think it's for that reason that's why the Japanese government is doing this very cruel action, because in the end, nobody can trace back and put the blame on the Japanese government. So the title is, the question we ask: Japanese government is releasing the radioactive Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean very soon. Very soon. They're supposed to be releasing, like, definitely this year, but it's like could be next month or very soon. And how will this affect you and the people around you? So when sometime in the future, near or far future, when somebody close to you, somebody in your family or among your friends, get some form of cancer or some form of illness, and the doctors cannot explain why, or they just said, oh, some kind of genetic kind of thing, then I would want you to think and remember about this live session that we're having this morning, because the cause of the person's illness, whether it's cancer or whatever it is, could be what we are saying in this morning's live session. The first thing that I would like to share with you is a short video on the experience of the Marshall Islands, the people in Marshall Islands. Let's take a look.
1946 and 1958, the U.S. tested 67 atomic weapons in the Marshall Islands. None more destructive than Castle Bravo, tested in 1954. The U.S. Army actually wasn't expecting the Castle Bravo explosion to be as big as it was.
Ran from possibly 1,500 to 3,000 Roentgen, well above the lethal human dose.
The devastation was massive.
Fallout of the radioactive particle now begins for a period of 10 hours or more.
My cousin Erosi, he was on top of a tree whenever the powder fell. And he ran to the ocean because he was burned all over. And it got worse. Nobody told him anything. All day long and all night long, the powder fell on the island. People were sick, diarrhea, stomachache, ache all over their body. The next day, their hair fall out. I was 4 years old at the time. My mom and dad, our family, went on the trip back to the island. I grew up on the island. I remember people get really, really sick all the time. Babies were born and no shell to the back of their head, You can see their brain.
When the radiation affects the cell and it affects the genetics, the DNA, then instead of making the normal products, it'll make the abnormal products.
That's Dr. Sheldon Ricklin. He's the only Marshallese doctor in the continental United States.
You got your immediate effects, your acute effects, and so in terms of the beta burns that people that experience during that time, the thyroid nodules and the thyroid cancers, the malformed babies, jellyfish babies, some people call them.
Some of these images are intensely graphic, but it's important to show what the aftermath of Castle Bravo was. Nason says she lost many relatives to cancer and other diseases she suspects were caused by nuclear radiation.
My Uncle John died. He died. His son, Leggett, he had leukemia. I think it's cancer in the blood.
Nason's family brought her cousin Lekage to the U.S. for treatment, but it was too late.
He never saw the island again. I've got thyroid too, and I got blood pressure too, and I'm taking medicine for them. So I'm trying to tell my doctors, that, it's from the, hydrogen bomb, but I don't know. I was young, and I didn't really understand a lot of things.
In March 2011.
So that was the short video clip of the Marshall Islands. It's longer than that. For those of you who want the full video clip, let us know. We can give you the link on the internet. And basically, that is to show you a few things, a few messages from that video clip is that the impact, the long-lasting effect of, in this case, atomic bomb testing, nuclear testing. And the second message is that the US government was very cruel, very deceptive, and never told the Marshall Islands. I mean, these are ordinary fishermen, people who are very simple folks. The US government never told them what the US government was doing to them. And in fact, the US government lied to them and said that what they're doing on the island, in the Marshall Islands, was actually to bring world peace. It was an act of God, and so on and so forth. And the US government used the Marshall Islands people as guinea pigs, because after that, the US government will go back to Marshall Islands once a year to test and see what is happening to the people there. And the poor people there, the very innocent local Marshall Islands natives, never knew that they were being used as guinea pigs. So what has that got to do with Fukushima? Well, I hope, we can see some relationship in the things that some of these governments do to people, ordinary people like us. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I'm not an oceanographer. I'm not a radiochemist. I'm just an ordinary citizen, right? So what I'm telling you is based on what I read from the whatever technical publications and so on, and I just like to make people aware of what is happening, because if you look at our local media, English media, Chinese media, or even around the region, very few of them writes about this particular issue, writes about the possible impact of this radioactive water being released into the Pacific Ocean, right? And I hope after this, our live session, you would do your own research, read more, talk to people more, and I will give you some of the links if you want to, some of the research, the scientific papers, and spread the word around among your friends, among your colleagues, among your family members. Because, like I said, sometime in the future, in the near future, in the far future, if somebody comes and say I'm ill and I don't really know why I'm sick, why I got this cancer, maybe you might be able to recall and find the answer, well, an answer to something that could be perplexing. So let's refresh our memory to 2011 and take a look at the triple disaster in Fukushima in Japan in 2011.
2011, a powerful earthquake off the eastern coast of Japan triggered a tsunami, which hit the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The 14-metre-high waves surged over defences and knocked out cooling systems, causing 3 of its reactors to go into meltdown.
This is Namiya Town, 20 kilometers from the Daiichi nuclear power plants, the site of the second worst nuclear accident in human history. Masami Yoshizawa used to be a dairy farmer. Then radiation from the nearby nuclear plant sickened his herd.
この330トンの牛がね、取引先から全部キャンセル、持ってこないでくれと、放射能浴びたからもう持ってこないでくださいっていうキャンセルを食らうんですね。
So that is to show you what it was like. That again is a very short summary of a longer video clip, and if you want, let us know. We will give you the link. But it's to show you some of the effects of what happened after the triple disaster happened in 2011, and then 12 years later, you find that the impact is still being felt. So the question now is, what do you do? The Japanese government made their decision in 2021 that they're going to release the radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. On the one hand, okay, let me just read some of the comments that we received so far. I'm not sure. The person did not put his name there. He says it will not affect anyone. All nuclear power plants in the world releases the same tritiated water routinely. That is, as far as I know, correct. But I think that kind of statement is the argument used by the Japanese government to mislead, to lie to people. It is a false statement. So the next question is, the next issue that I have is this. On the one hand, the Japanese government says it is safe to discharge into the Pacific Ocean. The International Atomic Energy Agency says it is safe. The US government supports the Japanese government decision to release the water, the radioactive water. Look, I don't trust the Japanese government. I don't trust the US government. I don't trust the IAEA. Who do I trust? Who do I listen to? I'm a non-scientist. But I know that health of ordinary people can be affected, will be affected. So what do? I'm in a dilemma. I look up, I go to people who are objective, who are independent, who are making their judgment based on scientific knowledge, technical knowledge. So I will go to people like, for example, what is known as the National Association of Marine Laboratories. This is a US-based association of about 100 plus marine laboratories which are located east and west of US and in some of the territories of the US, like in some of the Pacific Islands. So the opinion is based on marine science, environmental science, right? And I look at the Pacific Island Forum, which people say that it's not correct, but the Pacific Island, they are the one who are suffering from the cruel atomic testing by France, Britain, and US in the Pacific Ocean. They've been suffering for 70 years. And now, after the effect of climate change, they're now being asked to be exposed to radioactive water. So they, look, they live this every day. So they are very concerned and they have organized, they have consulted 5 international experts to get scientific views on whether what the Japanese government says is true or is a lie. And then we go to Greenpeace. Greenpeace is a very famous NGO, and in many ways, I respect the work that they do because they've done a lot of good. So I look up on what Greenpeace has done. And then I look at some of the statistics. For example, imports of seafood products into South Korea from Japan in May plunged 30%. Imports of fishery products, same thing, from Japan into Korea in April plunged 26%. So you have a situation, because South Korea and Japan are very close, where the people there are frightened. And the fishery industry in Japan, these are the people who have to go out to the sea every day. These are the people who don't have the luxury of sitting in the air-conditioned, comfortable parliament buildings in Tokyo. These are the ones who have to face the danger. They are the ones who have been protesting in Japan very frequently, telling the Japanese government, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, it is wrong. So I have, on the one hand, scientific community, scientists who say, you want to do it later. Don't do it now. And then you have people whose livelihoods are at stake every day who say, no, don't do it, it's dangerous. And you have people, the South Koreans who are so near to Japan, who has to eat. They eat a lot of seafood. And they stop buying Japanese fishery products, down 30%. So some of you says that, yeah, you eat once a week, and some say that love sashimi. So, after this, whether you want to eat sashimi again, whether you want to stop eating, you saw the cows that have got white dots, right? After the nuclear plant was destroyed. I'm not sure what is happening to the beef industry, but all I want to say is I'm very skeptical of the US government and the Japanese government, particularly if I look back and see what they've done to the Marshall Islands and what the US government has done to the Vietnamese people. You have orange agent, right? The chemical orange agent, which this was thrown into the whole of Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. That was in the 1960s. That is about 60 plus years ago. And the Vietnamese people are still suffering from that. And what has been done to the victims of this chemical, this orange agent. So the next thing I want to show you is another video clip as to whether you can trust the Japanese government or not.
This is Namiya Town, 20 kilometers from the Daiichi nuclear power plants, the site of the second worst nuclear accident in human history. Masami Yoshizawa used to be a dairy farmer. Then radiation from the nearby nuclear plant sickened his herd.
この330トンの牛がね、取引先から全部キャンセル、持ってこないでくれと。放射能浴びたからもう持ってこないでくださいっていうキャンセルを食らうんですね。で、会社の社長もですね、もう全部終わったと。もういいから、もうとにかく終わりだと。逃げろということでね。まあほとんど20キロ圏内即避難ということになったんで、もう繋いだまま逃げると。ですからその酪農家の牛舎は繋いだままその牛たちがやがて餓死をすると。水がない、餌がない。で、1年後です。牛たちの体にね、こういう模様が出始まっちゃった。黒毛和牛の体にね、白い斑点模様が出てきた。なぜかというと、この放射能まみれの草を食べる。で、1年後にこういう模様が出た。メラニン色素のね、突然変異なんです。黒毛和牛の毛の色、黒です。それから地肌も黒です。なのに、そこだけ色が白く変わっちゃう。こういう牛が20頭一斉に、事故から1年後ね、出てきた。
The soil surrounding Yoshizawa's ranch is still contaminated by radiation, with some locations measuring above the international safety threshold.
この野郎と、もう許せないと、東京電力ね。自衛隊が頑張ってる時、もう逃げるのかと。僕の残り生涯の時間をかけてでも、もうこの原発と戦うと、反原発で行くんだということを、おのずと決めたんですね。もう残りの人生をそれにかけようと。原発を終わりにする時代のために、ここで牛を世話しながら、自分の存在意義はそこにあるんだと。米が売れない、野菜が売れない、家にも帰れない、私の浪江町はチェルノブイリなんです。皆さん、福島の原発の事故は東京の明日を意味してるじゃありませんか。
The earthquake was stronger.
So there you see, I mean, look, that if you can, that's a farmer himself who lives in that area, right? And you saw what became of his cows. And do you want to trust a person like that, or do you want to trust the Japanese government? I mean, maybe I just show you the next one, whether you can trust the Japanese government. The next video clip.
The earthquake was stronger and the tsunami bigger than anyone expected. But for TEPCO, there had been warning signs.
That was one of the first nuclear power plants imported from the United States, called turnkey contract, which means that you just depend on the manufacturer. So there was a lack of basic know-how in dealing with nuclear design and everything.
The design for the nuclear plant meant that the emergency power sources were stored underground. The idea was that this would protect them from the risk of a hurricane rather than a tsunami. But what the design didn't account for was some of the highest tsunamis in Japan's history. And that mattered because the only thing protecting the plant from a tsunami were these walls. They were meant to stop waves of up to 5.7 meters, but the tsunami had waves that peaked at 17 meters high. 13 years before the disaster, a TEPCO employee found a crack in one of the reactors at Fukushima. When he reported it, TEPCO told him to conceal the evidence. He ignored the advice and told the government regulators, who ordered TEPCO to deal with the issue. So TEPCO fired the employee. In 2011, a New York Times report revealed 14 major lawsuits were filed against the Japanese government regarding adequate nuclear safety. Despite failing, they did point to operators who downplayed serious hazards.
They planned to actually address the structural problem, but then after they came to the conclusion that it's going to cost a lot of money. Potentially, it may shut down the plants.
So unfortunately, they put higher priority in continuing nuclear power plants operation over taking a measure against tsunami.
The earthquake.
Right, so that's another video clip, and if you want the link, please let us know. We will send it to you. I mean, it's not just I don't make a judgment just based on one instance, right? I mean, the triple disaster that hit Japan was unprecedented. There was earthquake, there was tsunami. So when you deal with such an unprecedented, huge natural disaster, a lot of times the governments don't really know how to react and so on. But if you look at the history of the Japanese government, it has been a government of deceits and lies. Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated, right, in 2021, he is the longest serving prime minister in Japan, and he was assassinated. And his assassination, I think, was a blessing in disguise. Why? Because before Shinzo Abe was assassinated, no one knew, especially in Japan, no one knew that 50% of the member of parliaments in the LDP had links and connection with the Korean Unification Church. It was disguised, it was hidden from the Japanese people. So this person who assassinated Shinzo Abe, when the police grilled him, he says the reason why he assassinated Shinzo Abe because his mother was forced by the Unification Church to donate all the family's savings to the church, and his whole family became poor. So that's why he's very angry with Shinzo Abe and the LDP. Then only the world and Japan knows that 50% of the Japanese ruling MPs have got linkage with the Unification Church. And Shinzo Abe's grandfather was a Class A war criminal who became a prime minister. And he has always been the one who wants to revive what is known as state Shinto. State Shinto before the Meiji Reformation was a form of Japanese religion, but it was pretty pacifist. But after the Meiji Restoration, state Shinto became a militant form of Shintoism. And that's why after the Meiji Reformation, when Japan became westernized and industrialized, you see Japan, before that, Japan never really went to invade other countries in Asia. But after that, Japan started fighting with Russia and China and Korea and invaded the rest of Asia. So I'm just giving you a big picture. All right. I mean, there are a lot of details. I'm just saying that here in this instance of the Fukushima, the Japanese government, despite scientific evidence pointing to the contrary, keep telling you it is safe. I don't trust them. I don't trust the Japanese government. Right? So let's take to where we are now. Let's look at this photo. This photo is from National Geographic. It shows you the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. If you look carefully in the top, at the top of the photo where the sea is, the ocean is, there are two kind of barrage, right? Now, this whole facility was wrongly designed and wrongly built in the first place. To be fair to the Japanese government at that time, because it was designed with it was a US design, and it was only meant to be able to withstand hurricanes, the type that you see in America, right? So if you go back to the photo, you look at the two barrages at the top. That's why they are pretty low. and they
and they
never
never
assumed
assumed
that
that
this nuclear
this nuclear
facility is
facility
hit
is
by
hit by
tsunami.
tsunami.
So those
So those
barrages
barrages
can
can
uh,
uh,
prevent waves
prevent
up to
waves
about
up to about
5-6
5, 6
meters.
meters.
The
The
tsunami, the
tsunami,
waves
the
were
waves were
about
about
15
15
meters.
meters.
So
So
when the
when the
tsunami
tsunami
reached
reached
the
the
shores of
shores of
this
this
nuclear plant,
nuclear
that's why
plant,
it
that's why it
was so
was so
devastating,
devastating.
right? And you look at those blue storage tanks, the gray storage tanks and the blue one. Can we look at the storage tanks? Those are tanks built to store water, which have been
have been
used
used
to
to
cool
cool
the
the
nuclear plant,
nuclear plant,
the
the
nuclear
nuclear
reactor.
reactor.
And those are
And those are
the
the
water in
water in those
those
tanks
tanks is going to
is
be
going to be
released
released
into
into
the
the
Pacific
Pacific
Ocean,
Ocean.
right?
Right?
They've been
They've been
storing it
storing it
for since 2011, and up to now there are about 1.3 million tons of this water, of this radioactive water. Can I take a look at the photo? So can you imagine, right, how huge the place is? And it's not the water that's being stored is not, there's no limit to it, because every day you having to keep on adding new water that has been used to cool the nuclear reactor. So it keeps on building up, right? So the Japanese government's argument is that I got no more storage space. I'm running out of storage space. And so I got to release it into the Pacific Ocean. If you listen to the argument, you think carefully, the argument, it is so flimsy, it is so, it is such a poorly made excuse that immediately you cannot trust them, because the counter argument from many of the scientists is that, look, you can always extend your storage, you can always build more storage, and so on. There are better solutions than discharging this radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. So let me just, like I said, I am not a scientist, I'm not a biologist, I'm not technically trained. Let me just read a few things for you that I think are very important. Like I said, there's the National Association of Marine Laboratories. And what it says is this. This was a paper, I have to read it from my notes, right? Because it's very technical. They released this position paper in December 2022, which was only 5-6 months ago. The title says, Scientific Opposition to Japan's Planned Release of over 1.3 million tons of radioactively contaminated water from the Fukushima Daiichi power plant disaster into the Pacific Ocean. The marine laboratories, like I said, these are not your usual, this is not your laboratory where you go and do your blood test. These are marine laboratories that specializes in oceanographic studies, environmental studies, marine biology, and many of them are linked, associated with university. For example, there's one, I think was the earliest one in US, is associated with University of Chicago. And one of the scientists, Dr. Ken Buseller, works in the Woods Hole Marine Lab that is linked, that is associated with MIT. So this is not your cheapo type of laboratory. These are specially focused laboratories on things related to marine science and marine environment. So it says here, this association opposes Japan's plan to begin releasing this commencing 2023. This opposition is based on the fact that there's a lack of adequate and accurate scientific data supporting Japan's assertion of safety. Furthermore, there is an abundance of data demonstrating serious concerns about releasing radioactively contaminated water. We are concerned about the absence of critical data on the radionuclide content of each tank of the storage tank that we showed you earlier, the Advanced Liquid Processing System, the ALPS, which is a system that is used to filter this water. That means they are concerned with this system, which is used to remove the radionuclides, and the assumption that upon the release of the contaminated wastewater, dilution is the solution to pollution. So there is this general belief that as you release it to the ocean, it gets diluted, and therefore the danger, the harm is being diluted. So this association says that's nonsense. Many of the radionuclides contained in the accumulated waste cooling water have half-lives ranging from decades to centuries, and their deleterious effects range from DNA damage and cellular stress to elevated cancer risks in people who eat affected marine organisms. Such as clams, oysters, crabs, lobsters, shrimps, and fishes. Additionally, the effectiveness of the ALPS in almost completely removing the over 60 different radionuclides present in the affected wastewater remains a serious concern due to the absence of critical data. So the risk, like one commentator says, that every nuclear plant releases the same treated water. It's not just tritium. There are more than 60 different radionuclides present in the affected wastewater, some of which have an affinity to target specific tissues, glands, organs, and metabolic pathways in living organisms, including people like us. This is from the National Association of Marine Laboratories. The supporting data provided by the Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, and the Japanese government are insufficient and in some cases incorrect, with flaws in sampling protocols, statistical design, sample analysis, and assumptions, which in turn lead to flaws in the conclusion of safety and prevent a more thorough evaluation of better alternative approaches to disposal. A full range of approaches to addressing the problem of safely containing, storing, and disposing of the radioactive waste have not been adequately explored, and alternatives to ocean dumping should be examined in greater detail and with extensive scientific rigor. This is 100 over marine laboratories, like the Woodhull Ocean Laboratory. That single marine laboratory has got over, if I remember correctly, they have about 1,000 employees. Out of that, I think about 500-600 are scientists. And there is only one member of this association. In this case, to read back this position paper from the association, in this case, we believe policymakers have not fully availed themselves of the available science and should do so before making any final decisions on releasing this contaminated water into the Pacific. We urge this from them, this is from the association. We urge the government of Japan to stop pursuing their planned and precedent-setting release of radioactively contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean, and to work with the broader scientific community to pursue other approaches that protect ocean life, human health, and those communities who depend on ecologically, economically, and culturally valuable marine resources. Those of you who want the full text of this, please let us know. We'll email it to you, we'll send it to you. So if you do not trust the National Association of Marine Laboratories, why don't we go to scientists, right? These are 5 scientists here. One is Dr. Ken Brusseler. He's a senior scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, Boston. Ferenc Daneco-Veres, who is a scientist at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in California. Anthony M. Hooker, who is a director of radiation research in University of Adelaide. Arjun Makhijani is president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. This Institute for Energy and Environmental Research is based in Heidelberg, Germany. And Robert Richmond, director of a marine laboratory at University of Hawaii. So they wrote an article in the Japan Times. This was recently in 2023. They wrote this article opposing the release of this wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. The justification for ocean discharge focus. I'm reading from the article. The justification for ocean discharge focuses largely on the assumed levels of radioactivity from tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen that cannot be easily removed by ALPS, which is used for treating contaminated water. Tritium is only part of the story, and a full assessment of all of the water contaminants stored inside those tanks at the Fukushima plant has yet to be made and verified by independent parties. Our specific concerns include the adequacy, accuracy, and reliability of the available data. A key measure of safety is a risk factor that combines the activities of more than 60 radioactive contaminants. So there are more than 60 radioactive contaminants, not just one. However, only a small subset of these radioactive contaminants, about 7 to 10 of them, including tritium, have been regularly measured. The rest have not been regularly measured. Over a quarter of the more than 1,000 tanks have been, only roughly a quarter of the 1,000 tanks have been analyzed. This, combined with the large variability among tanks, means the final dilution rates for tritium and the cleanup necessary for all contaminants are not well known. The bottom line is, it is impossible to engineer and assess the impact of any discharge plan without first knowing what is inside the tanks. In other words, the Japanese government and TEPCO have not explored, have not investigated what is fully inside the tanks, and yet they want to release the water inside the tank. TEPCO stated in its radiological impact assessment that to meet its requirements, dilution will be needed by a factor greater than 100. In fact, the dilution rate we calculate is 250 on average and more than 1,000 times for many of the tanks where analyses are available. Prediction of the fate of tritium in the ocean need to include OBT. OBT is organically bound forms of tritium, as well as the more predictable inorganic form in tritiated water. TEPCO has yet to do this. The focus on tritium also neglects the fact that the non-tritium radionuclides are generally or of greater health concern, as evidenced by their much higher dose coefficient. How important is the Pacific Ocean? Pacific Ocean provides half of the oxygen that we breathe and store almost 1/3 of the carbon dioxide that we produce. I mean, like I said, these are all from, I'm not a scientist, these are from the scientists. So they conclude that the present plan by the Japanese government does not provide the assurance of safety needed for people's health or for sound stewardship of the Pacific Ocean. The article is pretty long. Those of you who want, let me know. I just give you a few quotations from Greenpeace. Greenpeace also released a statement saying that they are opposed to the discharge to the water dumping plan. Again, they criticize the ALPS, which is the method to clean the water, because it has been, to use Greenpeace exact words, the ALPS has been a spectacular failure. And then you got, in addition to tritium, you got radioactive carbon C14 in the wastewater, right? And plutonium isotopes, iodine 129, strontium 90, that will all be released into the Pacific Ocean. Again, it's a long article giving you all the scientific evidence that what the Japanese government is doing is wrong, deceitful, and cruel. Now, the other point that is made by Greenpeace is that the release of the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean violates international law. Specifically, it violates the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. It goes on. Says that TEPCO, the Japanese government, and the International Atomic Agency refuse to accept that the wastewater crisis points to a deeper nuclear crisis at the Fukushima plant. I will not, because it's very long, I will not continue. I will move on to another one, right? This is from, this, whether from New York Times, whether you can trust TEPCO, the Tokyo Power Electric Company. Basically, they're saying that TEPCO, the nuclear regulator in Japan, and the Japanese government packed together. So you cannot trust any one of them. And this is from the New York Times. Again, like I said, if you want, I can give you the link. So it quoted an incident in 2000, where I showed you the slide earlier. In 2000, Kei Sugaoka, a Japanese-American nuclear inspector who had done work for General Electric at Daiichi, told Japan's nuclear regulator about a cracked steam dryer that he believed was being concealed. Right? And what happened was, this person was actually sacked by TEPCO. So instead of actions taken against the nuclear plant operator, the whistleblower was sacked. In 2002, after TEPCO's cover-up, this before the Fukushima disaster, this is 2002. In 2002, after TEPCO's cover-ups finally became public, its chairman and president resigned, only to be given advisory posts at TEPCO. Other executives were demoted, but later were given jobs at companies that do business with TEPCO. Still others received small pay cuts, tiny pay cuts for their roles in the cover-up. And after a temporary shutdown, TEPCO resumed operating this particular nuclear plant. So remember in a separate live session, I said that corruption in Japan is actually very severe. This is corruption. Just as in any Japanese village, this is an article, I'm still reading the article from New York Times. Just as in any Japanese village, the line-minded, that means the nuclear industry officials, the bureaucrats, the politicians, and the scientists have prospered by rewarding one another with construction projects. I mean, if it sounds like Malaysia, yeah, it sounds like that. All right, construction projects, lucrative positions, political and financial regulatory support. The few openly skeptical of nuclear power's safety become village outcasts, losing out promotions and support. And in fact, this TEPCO, the Japanese government, the nuclear regulator, the whole nuclear industry loves to have repairs and construction because they get more money, they get more kickbacks. And in Japan, they have a practice called amakudari. That means you descend from heaven. It is widely practiced in the Japanese industries. What it means is that amakudari allows senior bureaucrats, usually in their 50s, to have cushy jobs at the companies that they once regulate. Again, collusions flows the other way too in the lesser known. So there's one is known as ama agari. That means ascent to heaven. So it's the opposite. That one is descent to heaven. This one is ascent to heaven. So it's the same thing, the same kind of collaboration, the same kind of conflict of interest arrangement where whatever they're supposed to regulate is not regulated. And the article is about 6 pages long, so I won't continue. I will just move on to the next point. In the case of the Chinese government, they have also presented views of Japanese experts. There's one, Hikaru Amano, who is a specialist in environmental radiological analysis. He opposes the dumping of the water. And there's a director of the Hokkaido Cancer Center, same thing, he opposes it. And there's Masashi Goto, he's an expert in the Citizens Commission on Nuclear Energy. He said the same thing. So, like I said, these are people that don't have vested interests. And then, of course, you have the Pacific Islands Forum, where they have a seminar in January this year, and they call the experts to give their views as to whether what the Japanese government is doing is right or wrong. And the conclusion is that it is not correct, and the whole thing should be halted, the whole thing should be subjected to further scientific analysis. Can I look at the map of the Pacific Ocean? Okay, this is the map of the Pacific Ocean, and on this side here you can see North America, United States. On this side here, you can see Japan, China, South China Sea, and Australia, and then you can see the different current flows. The Pacific Ocean may look huge. Of course, it is huge. It is the biggest body of water in the world. But because the currents are so strong, so powerful, they can flow from one side to the other side pretty rapidly. So, like for example, after the 2011 that disaster, when it first broke out, the bluefin tuna were found to be radioactive. This bluefin tuna was on the coast of the United States. They were found to be radioactive in less than 1 year later. So that's how fast the contamination can work. And because we're in Malaysia, we may think that, well, we're safe. You know, water will flow wherever it wants to flow, right? You got the North Pacific Ocean, you got the South Pacific Ocean. After that, you got the South China Sea. I mean, for those fishermen in Kelantan, Terengganu, and Pahang, they are going to fish in the South China Sea, right? And South China Sea is connected to the Pacific Ocean. So I'm not an oceanographer, right? But all I know is that water will flow everywhere. And from what I can read is that the scientists know that it will spread. It's just that you do not know exactly where it will spread to and when it will spread to. But what you know for sure is that the water will flow everywhere. So will it flow to the South China Sea? You know, we catch our kembong, our tenggiri, our pomfret from all those areas. The fishermen who are there fishing every day they go out to the water, how are they going to be affected? So that's why I showed you the experience of the atomic bomb testing in Marshall Islands 60, 70 years ago. Because those natives in the Marshall Islands didn't know what was happening to them, didn't know that they were being exposed to white powder that fell from the sky. And then suddenly, you know, they got all skin problems, suddenly they get cancer, suddenly the baby born with no brain, no skull. So this is something where no one can predict what the impact will be, when it will be. So if 5 years later somebody comes and tell you, hey, you know, I got this funny cancer here, I got this funny thyroid problem, and then the doctor says, no, genetic. Is that correct? Maybe you've been eating too much sushi and sashimi and imported all from Japan. Why is it that the South Koreans have imported so much less fishery products from Japan? And this is even before the water has been discharged. The water is going to be discharged very soon. There's this woman here, they interviewed this lady, is a Korean lady, by the name of Kim, 36 years old, right, who has just opened a resort in southern Korea, in the southern part of southern Korea. And she says, I don't feel like buying local or imported seafood because I don't want to die from a serious illness. And this, they quoted Lee Jong-jun, he's an independent nuclear engineering inspector in South Korea, right? Say that Japanese scientific claims are all false. And the thing is, what do you do? What do we do? I mean, on our side, at Capital Dynamics, we are going to write a letter. We're going to write a letter to the Malaysian government to take a serious look at it, and then if they are convinced, to make a statement to ask the Japanese government to stop or delay the discharge until when the scientific evidence is a lot more convincing. On your side, what is it that you can do? Well, I mean, if you want to put a point across, you want to put pressure so that the right actions can be taken. You can boycott the Japanese products, the sashimi, the sushi, their beef, and so on. Boycott those products so that they get the message, right? And then Malaysian government can also maybe label the products, give a warning, like, you know, when you smoke a cigarette, that it can kill you. You can put a label there that this is imported from Japan, that it could be containing harmful radioactive materials, and so on and so forth. Or contact Greenpeace, or the Pacific Island Forum, or the National Association of Marine Laboratories in US to support them and to ask them what ordinary citizens, what ordinary people like us can do to make sure that the message to the Japanese government is heard and correct decision is being taken. The other thing that we can do is spread the word around among especially in social media, among your friends, so that increase the pressure on the Japanese government to stop executing this unproven, unscientific plan. Right? Just remember, like what I showed you, the Marshall Islands. I mean, that is different, but that is also radioactive and of a different degree, of a different nature. In that case, the cause effect relationship is easily linked because before the atomic bombs testing were done, the people lived there happily, healthily, you know. And then once the atomic bomb testings were done, they all suffered like mad. So the linkage is very clear, and then you can see the white powder falling out from the sky. In this case, the Japanese government is very, very deceptive, very deceitful, because when this contaminated water is being discharged into the Pacific Ocean, how are you going to prove that it came from Fukushima nuclear reactor? How are you going to prove that? The radioactive materials would have gone into the food chain. It would have gone into the plankton, which is the planktons would be the foundation of our food chain, right? And then the marine life, the fish and all that, your crabs will eat the planktons, right? And then we catch the fish, we eat the fish, and then we get sick, we get the cancer. So how are you going to prove that I ate the fish that ate the plankton that got the radioactive materials from Fukushima nuclear power plant? So that is how deceitful the Japanese government is, because they know that in the end you cannot find the evidence to prove that they are guilty. It's just, I mean, uh, I don't know. I don't know how to convince people to do something. I mean, in our case, we are an investment company, we are fund manager, but we are doing this to help increase the awareness because I read quite a bit of the scientific materials, and I found that something has to be done. We have to raise the consciousness, the awareness of people so that innocent people can be protected. Right? I mean, we don't expect to get any reward from anyone. We just hope that sometime in the future, people look back at this live session and say that, well, this live session maybe might save myself, might save my friends, save my family from some form of cancer or some form of illness. So, I think the simple question, my simple logic is this, which I hope you think carefully. The Japanese government says it is safe. TEPCO says they've taken all the measures to make it safe. The United States government support it. So my question is this. Now, if the contaminated water is so safe, why doesn't the Japanese government pour the water into their own land? Why is it that the Japanese government don't let the people drink this water? You say it's safe, ma? You say that it doesn't affect, ma? Why don't you let the people drink the water? Why don't you store the water into your land? Why point to the Pacific Ocean where the cause effect cannot be established, the relationship where I cannot find evidence to make you accountable for it? So that's why I look at the scientific evidence, I use my simple logic, and I say that the Japanese government is cruel because they know it and they do it. If they do not know all these things, you might give them the excuse that, okay, fair enough, you didn't know, therefore we forgive you. But here you have global scientists, internationally respected scientists, saying, don't do it, and yet you knowingly do it. That is not only irresponsible, that is bloody cruel, and it should be stopped. Okay, some comments. South Korea is the first victim from Paul. I'm not sure because the water will flow in all kinds of directions. I'm not sure who is the first victim. I hope that our Malaysian fishermen on the East Coast or those people in Sabah and Sarawak where you're so open to the South China Sea, or people in Singapore where you are exposed to the South China Sea, I hope you guys, those guys there are not the first victims, because you're not going to get any compensation from anybody. Okay, this person asked, what can we do as individuals to prevent this disaster from happening? I think I've gone through that. I think the clearest message, like what the South Koreans have done, is stop buying the food, stop buying the fishery products. The imports have plunged. So if Malaysians stop eating sashimi, if Singaporeans stop eating sushi, and the Vietnamese, and all people do that, of course the Japanese government has no choice but to listen to you. Definitely. But now nothing has been done. They don't get hurt. They don't get the message. How do you protect yourself? This is from P. Wensko. How do you protect yourself? That's a tough question because I love seafood. I don't eat sashimi. I don't eat sushi because I don't like raw food. So, but I love seafood. So I'm also at a loss because the fish that I get, I don't know whether it's coming from Straits of Malacca or whether it's come from South China Sea. Uh, I don't really know how to answer this question. This which is why I'm one of the reasons why I'm conducting this live session, so that the discharge of this contaminated water can be stopped or postponed at least until better evidence is found, so that we can still enjoy eating the marine products, the fishery products, peacefully. Like I said, I love fish. I love to eat fish. Wei Chun says potential huge impact and claims on insurance company. They should take the lead with the governments to raise strong objection. Yes and no, Wei Chun, because like I said, it's almost impossible to link a person having some form of thyroid cancer to the seafood that was contaminated by the Fukushima contaminated water. That linkage is almost impossible to prove. I mean, based on my whatever knowledge that I have. So I don't think the insurance company is going to do anything. This is from Water. Hey, seems like TEPCO and the Japanese government want to avoid costly solution, just like what they have done before. Right? Totally correct. So what the Japanese government is doing is the cheapest and the easiest solution, because there are other alternatives which the scientists have proposed, and it can be done. It's just that it's more costly, but that is financial cost. This one is cheap in terms of dollars and cents, but costly in human lives. And so, Alex Tan, what can we do? I've given you a few options. One of the things like I say is to have this live session to increase awareness. We are writing a letter to the Malaysian government, and I do not know whether I should also write a letter to the Southeast Asian government, to Singapore government as well, because all of us face the South China Sea. JYE says, let the Japanese people drink from the water after further treatment if they claim is safe to human health. Exactly, that's my point. That's what I said. My logic tells me that you, the Japanese government, the Kishida, you keep saying it's safe, it's safe. Let your own people drink it. Don't pour it into the ocean. Look, once you pour the water into the ocean, once you dump this water into the ocean, you cannot take it back. It is permanent. Not only is the impact permanent, but the Japanese government is setting a very dangerous precedent. If the US government, the International Atomic Energy Agency, can allow the Japanese government to do such an irresponsible act, why can't the other countries do it? Why can't South Korea, North Korea, China, Vietnam, Russia, why can't they do it? So then what happens to the Pacific Ocean? By which time, what? It's too late. On top of climate change, on top of everything else, you have, a Pacific Ocean that cannot be used for human life. From Alibaba, it says boycott all goods from Japan. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but I get your point, right? Because the message has to be sent that, look, you have got other options and you refuse to consider other options which are scientifically safer. Okay, this is from Chui Kitsun. He's talking about our technical issues. I agree with you. He says that when we share the other screen, there's echo, and our software is taking two input from the voice. And if we're using Streamlab, we have to remove the second source of sound input. Thank you, Mr. Chui. As you can see, our IT is not that great. You know, we keep giving technical issues all the time, and they blame the machine. So, well, it's an hour plus. Sorry, my live session is always very long. I still got a lot of materials. For those, okay, the other thing that I've done is, this is our latest publication in our iCapital. We have written a very long, a complete article on this problem. Will Fukushima kill you? So at least we reach out to our subscribers, and from there we hope that our subscribers will reach out to their friends, their colleagues, their family, and the word spreads around. And I think when the sales of sushi and sashimi drops by 50%, I think the message will be taken. Well, I hope you all do your part. Like I mentioned to you, the more we spread the word, the more effective the message will be. And you got on one side Japanese government, TEPCO, US government, whom I don't trust at all. I got the National Marine Laboratories, where they're all scientists. I got Dr. Ken Buisler. I got a few other scientists from all over the world. They got no hidden agenda. They're giving you scientific evidence. I trust these people, and I trust my own simple logic. If the water is so safe, let the Japanese people drink it. Okay, please share. This one you must share as many as you can, like as much as you can, give your comments, whether you agree or disagree. And you got any other suggestions, any topics that you want us to discuss in our live session, please write to us. We will do our best and make sure that whatever that we know is being shared. Again, thank you very much and have a good weekend.